Good morning and welcome to Focus on the News. I'm Dick Black, and we have our co-host John Tigas with us. John, how are you this morning?
Oh, doing good. It's actually a wedding morning for me, so I'm dressed in white, almost looking as good as Senator Black this morning.
Well, we have some some very peculiar things going on today, and there was an announcement. It was in Zero Hedge, but they were really referring to a Washington Post article where 30 House Democrats were urging a dramatic shift in Joe Biden's Ukraine policy, and they said it was time to get serious about diplomacy or risk a nuclear miscalculation. This was quite a turnaround for the Democrats, don't you think?
Oh my goodness, we continually seem to be provoking, hoping for some sort of crazy strike or some sort of outrageous action, and then it calms down, and then another one happens. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact we have an election in 2 weeks.
Well, that's very worrisome. Well, it was interesting. Some of the language that was used in the first article by the Washington Post, it said they underscored that the Democrats, the 30 Democrats, were calling for the U.S. to dramatically shift its strategy on the Ukraine war for the first time. And then they quoted, this is a quote from the letter written by the 30 Democrats. The longer the war in Ukraine goes on, the greater the risk of escalation to widespread devastating effect. Now, I think they're referring to nuclear war. And they go on to say, we need to engage in a proactive diplomatic push in an effort to seek a realistic framework for a ceasefire. And then they compliment Biden as they go along in this, and they say, crucially, you've done this while maintaining that it's imperative to avoid direct military conflict with Russia. So they're saying, these are the Democrats complimenting their boss, saying, you have always made it clear that it's imperative to avoid direct conflict with Russia, which would lead to World War III. Now, just as an aside, this week, there's been all sorts of publicity put out by U.S. Central Command and other U.S. agencies about the 101st Air Assault Division moving within several miles of the Ukrainian border. And the commander of the division has come out and said, essentially, we're ready for war with Russia. I mean, that's essentially the message. And so anyway, getting back to the letter that's put out by the 30 Democrats, said, the risk of nuclear weapons being used has never been higher, and that we agree with your goal, Mr. Biden, of avoiding direct military conflict as an overriding national security conflict. Well, I'm not sure, John, whether you've been able to see Jose Vega's tremendous takedown of AOC at the town hall meeting, where he basically, he said, I think this is a quote, yes. You ran as an outsider, yet you voted to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a nuclear war with Russia and China. Now, this was one of the most dramatic videos I've ever seen. It was on Tucker Carlson. He showed the whole thing on his show. Jose Vega, Code Pink is sort of floundering around. They've been kicked to the curb so many times by the Democratic Party. There is no anti-war movement in the Democratic Party. But Jose Vega has sort of taken control of the national anti-war movement, and both Republicans and the handful of Democrats who still ascribe to that. But what do you think? You think you sense some change in the public attitude towards what's going on?
You know, quite honestly, I don't think the public's paying much attention anymore. Those that got Ukrainian flags in their bios are flying them, and those that have concerns, I think they're a lot more concerned about what they see at the gas pump and at the grocery stores and what they see coming across the border. If you look at most polls, the Ukrainian war, polls about fourth or fifth in importance for most people, and yet we are literally on the brink of nuclear war at a level truly equal to what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, we have been provoking, whether it's the Nord Stream being blown up or blowing up bridges into Crimea. The U.S. is doing everything they can to start World War III. And you got to ask yourself, why is that? If the American people don't care about it, who does care about it? And what are they trying to do by continuing down this path? Why are they, when Democrats actually finally say enough, and then the next thing we know, they withdraw their letter? Something seriously wrong is going on. I mean, sinister going on. Yeah. And what do you, I mean, I can come up with all sorts of theories, but what do you think that is? In all your years and all the wars that you fought, sir, and all the politics you've seen, have you seen anything like this? And what do you make of it?
Yeah, well, the American people have very little say in war and peace. These are things that are decided above the level of the U.S. government. The boys in Davos are running the show. The globalist government, the one world order is alive, it is functioning, and it is running the whole global enterprise. Now, I mean, it's just amazing. Here you had 30 Democrats. That's a big block of the Democratic caucus. They put out this letter, very, very dramatic, saying we've got to achieve peace or we risk nuclear war. The next day, they pulled it back, and the Washington Post, which is sort of the official organ of the Central Intelligence Agency, in my opinion. I mean, that they would never say that. That's just my personal opinion. But they wrote 3 separate articles in the same day, jumping all over the place, trying to explain, how in the world could a good, responsible Democrat come out against bloodshed? I mean, the idea that we would have peace, what an outrage. We couldn't possibly have that. Obviously, these 30, very leftist Democrats they lost their senses. They snorted too much coke or something. I mean, they didn't say that. That's just me. But anyway, they were going to extraordinary lengths trying to disparage the letter. But it was interesting. At one point, they said, well, when the letter was withdrawn, the 30 congressmen said, well, it was just accidentally released. It was written back in June or July, and some staffer released it. But even the Washington Post pointed out, they said, well, the letter cited to things that just very recently happened. So obviously it wasn't written in June or July. What do I think is happening? I think that NATO, under the direction of the United States, is moving to the very brink of World War III, nuclear if necessary, non-nuclear if they could pull it off, by going right up to the very line. And we have signs of it. Now, Russia has just announced intelligence that indicates that Ukraine is about to employ a dirty bomb. Dirty bomb is not a nuclear bomb, but it's a conventional bomb that's encased in extremely radioactive material. The radioactivity kills people within a several mile radius, spreads a nuclear cloud that affects the environment. That's one thing. There's another thing, which is that Ukraine has been deliberately shelling, using U.S. HIMARS rockets, deliberately shelling dams. And what they're trying to do is that there's a large force of Russians who are across the Dnieper River, and what they want to do, if they can blow down the dam, it will wash away the pontoon bridge that continues to supply the Russians on the far side. This is crystal clear. And then they would cut off the Russians, and they would be able to destroy them in this pocket. They've been shelling this dam now for some weeks, and the Russians believe that they are about to destroy it. Now, I mean, this shows how bad the propaganda gets. Washington is now saying, no, this is not true. The Russians are trying to destroy the dam so that they will cut off their troops and have them all destroyed. I mean, it's just, they're relying on the fact that most people don't follow this stuff very closely, because anybody who did would say, obviously, the destruction of that dam would be a disaster for Russia. And so, you know, logically, you can say there's only one force that would do it, and it's not Russia, it is NATO, and under the guidance of the US. So it's very troubling. We moved the 101st, and very publicly. Just the other day, we surfaced an Ohio-class submarine, which is the one that's armed with some, I don't know whether it's 240 or 280 nuclear-tipped missiles. We deliberately surfaced it, which is one of the rarest things that's ever occurred. We did it, and the CENTCOM commander went on board to inspect the submarine. But basically, the surfacing of that submarine publicly was designed as nuclear saber rattling of the nth degree. So there's some really troubling things going on, and I hope.
Let's take that though. Let's take that scenario. Let's take the fact that it gets so bad, Russians and Putin is backed into a corner, that his only option is, forget the dirty bomb. He launches a tactical nuclear strike back. Then what happens?
I think if Russia, if we're not able to intimidate Russia with, you know, our total readiness, we're fully prepared now to launch a nuclear attack. If Russia were to respond, perhaps if they were to respond with some sort of an attack on Kiev, I think from that point forward, we'd see an escalation to where the chances of an all-out global thermonuclear war would become very high. 50% or better, right. Talking about most people on Earth dying, including in the Washington metropolitan area, and up in New York City would be, I think everybody agrees, those are the two foremost targets, but there are lots more in addition.
So why would the Davos boys, that's whoever they are, the global cabal that seems to be orchestrating this, what do they benefit from a thermonuclear global strike?
I don't think they would gain, but these are business tycoons who are in the business of taking risks. And I think their ultimate goal is to take over Russia, to dismantle it in some way. And with Russia totally in poverty, totally destroyed, then they would be able to move in, buy up all of the resources. The wealth of Russia is so gargantuan that it really has the potential, if we were to take it, to sort of rebalance the global budget, pay off some of our deficits and that kind of thing.
That were created by the Davos globalists by locking down the world. I mean, it's kind of nutty. We're got a self-licking ice cream cone now. Well,
I'm not sure that the boys from Davos want I don't think they want the global nuclear holocaust, but I think it's sort of like somebody playing Russian roulette, where you have these insane.
They call it Russian roulette for a reason.
Yeah, and in Russian roulette, you spin this cylinder on a revolver, you put it to your head, and you pull the trigger. And I think these guys are Russian roulette players, and they're saying, "What the heck? Most of them are old multi-billionaires. Let's go for it. Let's just, we will take a gamble that Russia will not do this." Mm-hmm. Now, they might be right, but if they are wrong, then our children, our grandchildren, all of our friends, the people we go to church with, they all die.
Well, last time I checked, the Russians don't have a long history of surrendering to anybody. So it just goes completely against their culture. It certainly goes against Putin's mode of operating and his psychology. I just don't see it how it happens. I don't see how this doesn't end really, really badly for everyone involved, and especially the American people. But and it doesn't, like, as you're pointing out, there's a lot of Democrats that are starting to ask questions about their own party and their party leadership, and the fact they have no real leader in the White House who can't even, get his, 2 sentences together now. And they're running other candidates like Fetterman that can't put together coherency. And many of them are fleeing. They're starting to do what Tulsi Gabbard's doing. And they're saying, I don't want to be the party of Warren perverts, and they're getting out. And yet a lot of folks like myself believe that the election is so badly mishandled and so badly, the systems itself are so taken over and subverted that on November 9th, we may still have very much a blue political climate. So one of those big blue political climates was in Florida. And since Ron DeSantis took over, we've seen some major changes. I see he's leading now by 14 points in the poll. And Florida now is agreed that they're going to strip the licenses of K-3 teachers who discuss sexuality. So we finally have a state that's saying enough, this has got to stop, and that they're going to stop those teachers from perverting children. Is this a sign of things to come, or is it just happening to be Ron DeSantis and he's the only one that has the fortitude to actually do something like this? This is an issue that it's so odd. For generations, I guess, a couple of generations, Democrats have ruled the public education world, and and they've been able to suppress any other type of education. Just they've had a monopoly. And ever since they started putting these transgender characters forward in the public school system, and also done the critical race theory, and they're creating racial hatred among the students, grooming children to be receptive to sexual advances by pedophiles.
the Republicans have firmly got a grip on education. And I don't think it's going to disappear overnight. I think it's going to be around for a long, long time. But, you know, I wish somebody could explain to me. I'm not talking about just, you know, the youngest children, but throughout public education. If we cannot teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, what in the world are we doing teaching children sex? I don't get it. I mean, I was in one of the first sex ed classes ever, and I remember the teacher saying, this was in Miami, Florida. She said, well, we're doing this because there were a couple of girls who became pregnant out of wedlock. Now, a couple of girls getting pregnant out of wedlock back in those days equates to 10,000 people in the same city getting pregnant out of wedlock every year. And so what are we doing? This family life education. Now we teach all sorts of sexual perversion and decadence and immorality. And what earthly benefit do we get out of that?
And especially amongst kids in kindergarten. But, you know, I was just talking with a gal last night that I met this summer who's outside of Chicago, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And her teenage son, she said, every day is coming back talking about being shown films on homosexuality. It's like, why? I mean, certainly, most of us can say, yeah, kindergarten, that's just crazy. Anything to do with sex is so premature. But across the board, this is going on at the high school and middle school level. They're being bombarded with sexual messages, perverse sexual messages that go completely against what most parents would ever show their children in their home.
You know, I would like to see states begin to enact constitutional amendments that prohibit the teaching of sexual topics other than perhaps biological, reproductive, physiology classes, but basically prohibit all sex in school. I mean, look, people have had children, ever since Adam and Eve were around. Adam and Eve didn't have anybody to say, hey, look, here's how you have a baby. No. So what do we gain by this stuff? I think we need constitutional amendments to just say sex is not a part of public education. Public education is about reading, writing, arithmetic, getting kids ready for the workplace, ready to be decent citizens.
Yeah.
That's we'll see. I think we've got the upper hand in that field, though.
Well, if you go there, though, if you take that approach, and it was the approach of education for 200 years at least, it's stated, and certainly Washington and Madison and others reiterated, that the only way you can have a constitutional republic is to have a moral people. That means that you actually have to teach virtue. And what we have going on is undermining virtue. It is the opposite of those foundational moral principles about how society functions in a healthy way, which is a man and a woman being married. That's how you have children. That's how you populate a country. That is how you grow up more children. And where we actually have people subverting the basic virtue of the most foundational principle, a thing called families. And it seems to me that it actually needs to do just that. We actually need to treat and train on virtue. And if public schools aren't going to do it, then we need to allow parents the option through school choice to choose a school that will do that, because that's how you have a healthy society, not by just focusing on academics only. Because we truly in our society right now have a bunch of highly educated idiots running our country. And that's because they don't understand the foundational moral principles that our founding fathers did. So I'm an advocate of a constitutional amendment to get back to the Constitution. How's that? Do we need a constitution? Maybe we shouldn't need that. maybe we should just actually follow what the Constitution says. But anyway, well, one other thing that has been going on is that we have COVID back in the news, not because COVID is spreading right now, but because there's continuing experimentation, particularly at Boston University, where they've actually been able to take the Omicron variant, which highly mutated, has not been very dangerous to people, but apparently now combined with the original variant of the COVID-19 has an 80% kill rate. What is going on that we are still playing around in labs with something that could kill 80% of the human population?
You know, this is an amazing story. Not just this particular thing, but if you go back in time, I don't know how long it's been, 20 years ago, I suppose, we had a huge push to ban germ warfare. And, you know, the British royalty was behind it, and all of the horses and all the king's men, all the boys from Davos, we've got to get rid of germ warfare. Well, everybody signed on. The world signed on, all the countries just about. And then the US continued to practice germ warfare. And if you look, we have up at Fort Detrick, Maryland, we have a germ warfare center there that's designed to produce various deadly pathogens. And we've got the CDC working on what do they call it? Gain of function research. Gain of function means make these biological agents more deadly so that they will kill more people in a war. I mean, let's be honest, that's what gain of function is. And so we've got this COVID. I think there are a lot of people, I mean, a very large number, who feel that that was artificially created in a laboratory. And even after all of the disclosures and the fact that the CDC was funding germ warfare in the Wuhan lab in China and funding germ warfare.
Thank you.
Dr. Fauci. and we're doing it also in Ukraine. Yeah. What does that have in common? We're funding germ warfare right inside or on the border of our two big enemies that we want to wipe out and make them part of the globalist cabal. It's fantastic that they can get away with this. I have not heard any of the mainstream media talking about why we are engaged in germ warfare when we made such a big hoopla about how we were getting rid of germ warfare.
Yeah. Scary. It's scary to realize, we started talking about nuclear problems, but that comes in a big boom and it's over. But this business of another potential, even more deadly strain, a much more deadly strain of a virus leaking out of a lab by accident is frightening. And to know that it's going on right here in the US with funding from the federal government. I mean, it just seems across the board, our so-called leaders have lost their minds, or they are literally working diligently to completely destroy this country economically, physically, certainly politically. It's a disaster. So give us a final word of hope in the midst of all we discussed today. Why should people be hopeful on this day after all the bad news we just got done going over? I guess it was good news that DeSantis is doing something, and little tiny Florida is having some sort of effect.
Yeah, and there is so much more. The prospects for the upcoming elections, absent an October surprise by the Biden administration in Ukraine, which they're clearly preparing for it. Whether they will pull the trigger or perhaps, the best thing to prevent a
Like
false
press the
flag
button.
attack is if you get the word out about a false flag attack, it kind of takes the fun out of it, and you can kill them off sometimes. So we'll see. If that doesn't happen, the prospects for a Republican victory are extraordinarily high, both in the House and in the Senate at this point. Now, not only are we, it's not so much a party label that's the big deal, but the new crop of Republicans coming in seem to be inclined to be much more America first, taking care of our borders, not worrying so much about the Ukrainian borders, but worrying about the southern border of the United States with Mexico, cracking down on the cartels, doing all of these things. These are, some of these candidates are really, really solid citizens who care about the American people. They care about the wave of crime that's taken over this nation, the drugs and so forth. So if things go as hoped, we're down to 2 weeks right now before the election. And if it happens without some sort of a dirty bomb or blasting down a dam and flooding vast areas, something like that in Ukraine, which would only help the Democrats, by the way, it would hurt the Republicans. The Republicans just want to stay on course. They don't want an October surprise. So if an October surprise comes, it won't be the Russians. It'll be the Biden administration launching it. Everybody needs to understand that. But if that doesn't happen, if they decide not to pull the trigger over in Ukraine, I think we're going to see a shock wave across America that is going to be so positive and so powerful that it's really going to rock these radicals on their heels. It might even mean that a few Democrats who believe in decent things might run for office and get elected, or maybe there'll be a new party that will form out of the ashes. I don't know.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. My belief in the fair election system is not high, but I want to be hopeful. So thank you for ending this on a positive note. And
okay, well, John, with that, I guess we'll sign off. And this has been Focus on the News. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.